These are actually the only aeroplanes that NATO owns. All the others that they use are lent by the nations. In fact, if the British forces had had the use of the AWACS early warning facilities in the Falklands, they might well have been able to prevent the sinking of the Sheffield and the Atlantic conveyor. And another new aeroplane here, the BAE 146 feeder liner. The 146 is already in service with airlines like Dan Air, but this is one of two that belong to the RAF. British Aerospace hopes to take on the American aircraft industry at its own game with the 146, and one of the attributes they boast about is its quietness. In independent tests in the States, it was not only quieter than the other jets, it was even quieter than the turboprops. And why's the RAF got it? Well, they say they're evaluating it as a medium-range transport, but everyone knows they're really thinking about replacing the rather ancient Andovers on the Queen's flight with the 146. And another Ford jet, this one perhaps more familiar, the RAF's Nimrod anti-submarine and maritime patrol aircraft. Note the air-to-air refuelling probe on the front, added during the Falklands conflict. In case you're wondering, the thing at the back has nothing to do with that. It's called a magnetic anomaly detector, it's for finding submarines, and it's usually known as the Mad Sting. But I mentioned the refuelling probe at the front so that you can compare it with the refuelling arrangements on the next aeroplane, which is the Lockheed C-141 Starlifter. You'll remember that's the one that's the next size down from the big C-5 Galaxy. This one is the stretched version. They made it longer, so it can now carry nearly 200 troops. This aircraft can also be refueled in the air, but instead of having a probe at the front that the pilot flies into a drogue streamed behind a tanker aircraft, as the RAF does, USAF aircraft have a fueling point on top of the fuselage. It's that sort of black lump above the flight deck there. And it's up to a boom operator on the tanker aircraft to direct a boom into that point and keep it there. This prettily tarted up F4 Phantom is the billboard of the 25th anniversary celebrations that I mentioned earlier. And there are more than 30 other F4s from various countries parked in line. But this is just a small part of an enormous static display of aircraft from 31 different air arms from all over the world, as well as several civil-owned aeroplanes. You have to add to that arena shows of things like gymnastics, marching bands and motorbike displays. But the odd thing about it all was that apart from some of the ground facilities that are clearly run for commercial purposes, most of the organising is done by those 3,000 plus volunteers that I talked about at the start. They do everything from air traffic control to building lavatories, from operations direction to car park marshalling. They do it for free because they enjoy it and because the profits go to a good cause, the RAF Benevolent Fund. Although I have once or twice heard people swear at the end of the show that they'd never do it again. Somehow, they're always back the next time. Incidentally, although they're volunteers, they're not amateurs. Where necessary, they're all professionally qualified for their jobs. For instance, many of the air traffic controllers take leave from their jobs at the London Air Traffic Control Centre. But as well as those arena shows and static displays, you could also buy your own Biggles kit, or indeed kit yourself out with stickers for every mood. And of course all the proceeds of the day go towards that RAF Benevolent Fund. Because the wartime members of the RAF that the fund helps are getting old, and the fund expects to keep needing more money for at least the next 10 years. So that's probably a good omen for the future of the air tattoo. As well as the work of the volunteers, the whole thing also depends on sponsorship from firms. But clearly, the main contributors are the paying public. And for people who may decide that there are just too many aeroplanes altogether, there's always the funfair. It goes to a very good cause. But let's rejoin the people on the display line. They're waiting for the highlight of the show, the Air Tattoo's tribute to its late president, Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader, the legless World War II fighter ace who died last year. And the tribute starts with the only flying example left out of more than 7,300 Lancaster bombers built in the war. The Lancaster belongs to the RAF's Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, and the flight's CO, Squadron Leader Scott Anderson, was kind enough to invite our cameras on board to sample the excitement of flying in the world's most famous bomber, and also to record some of the display from the air. So let's just enjoy the music of those famous Merlin engines.
Steer.
Steer is 17.
Just refresh me on the run-in details on the brake, please. Whoever's got the piece of paper, I think it's a Copart.
Yeah, close coming.
Check, I've got the run-in. And the Greenham, we're flying past opposite the direction of takeoff, so it'll be 2-9 there. At the end of the fly past, which is our normal Ussen box with the fighters on either wing, the fighters are moving off to form their own Vic for a run-in to brake. After that, the Hurricane will be doing his display landing, after which we do our fly pasts and land.
Fine, thank you. Bomb doors now, please.
Selected.
Turning. Coming up. Far up, please.
But after that taste of wartime nostalgia, it's time for the aircraft that Bader himself flew. His favourite was the Hurricane, but he achieved his greatest success and fame on the Spitfire. And in its tribute to him, the International Air Tattoo got together the biggest gathering of Spitfires seen in many years.
Spitfires confirming cleared takeoff, surface wind 130 degrees, 15 knots.
So 7 Spitfires took off from the Greenham runway, followed by Bader's favourite, the Hurricane. This one was the last Hurricane to be built of some 14,000 aircraft. at this stage, let's avail ourselves of Squadron Leader Scott Anderson's offer and look at the Spitfires and the Hurricane from the point of view of the Lancaster crew.
Roger, we're going to try and make 2,000, if not, it'll be 1,500. You just see what's happening out the back now and let me know, please.
And that's a view that many wartime tail-end Charlies will recall, seen from the Lancaster tail gunner's position.
Roger, 2,000 feet on 1011. Good afternoon.
But looking at it now from the mid-upper turret, we see our escorting fighters starting to peel off as they would have done in preparation for action.
And about 3 miles south of Bletchley. Correction, 5 miles south of Bletchley.
Royal 5, Roger. Not identified as yet. Continue via part 1,500 feet. I'll advise you when I have you identified. The Cotswold QNH 1024. Echo Sierra, you're well cleared of...
I mentioned earlier that Squadron Leader Scott Anderson was the CEO of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Well, he's also the captain of the Lancaster, and during the trip he told us a bit about his unique command.
To commemorate the Royal Air Force's major battle honours, which is the Battle of Britain and the Battle of Germany, and to remind the British public of the part the Royal Air Force played in the defence of the United Kingdom. We have 4 Spitfires, 2 Hurricanes and 1 Lancaster. All the aircrew, apart from myself, are volunteers. I'm the only full-time pilot on the flight. All the other people are members of the OCU at Coningsby or in staff jobs at the RAF Coningsby.
Spitfires from Lancaster are down at the downwind end of the runway if you wish to break off now for your rejoin.
Roger, 4 movers. 1 and 3 going gently left. 2, cleared across under and join main.
Well, it's a very gentlemanly aeroplane. It is beautiful. It gives a complete impression of confidence to the pilot. It must have been a wonderful aeroplane in its day, and it still is.
Spitfires, 3 downwind to land.
Spitfires right, Roger. Continue and feel free to clear right at the intersection. If you can, the upwind cable is rigged.
Understand the approach end cable is rigged.
The approach end cable is clear. The upwind end is rigged.
Okay.
Straightening.
37 knots.
Okay, straightening.
104.
2650 RPM.
2650.
Finally, following the Lone Hurricane, the last tribute to Group Captain Sir Douglas Bader, CBE, DSO and Bar, DFC and Bar, French Legion of Honour and Croix de Guerre. Spitfires in the missing man formation, the airman's traditional mark of respect, with the empty number 2 position on the leader's left. But Bader himself was always the first to say the show must go on, and this piece of science fiction is coming next after the break. Join me for the rest of the International Air Tattoo 1983. Welcome back to the International Air Tattoo. And no, this isn't something that's escaped from Return of the Jedi, but it is a very rare appearance in public in Britain. It's the United States SR-71 Blackbird reconnaissance vehicle, the fastest and highest airplane in the world. And when it arrived at Greenham Common, the pilot, Colonel Burdett Thomas,